So during the Renaissance, there was a lot of new findings and new paths being taken by people, but one of the most important aspects was the music. Strictly vocal, not a lot of instruments until towards the end of the period itself, but in the beginning of, the Renaissance period, like most other periods, music was strictly religious. So they had the Mass, so they had Sanctus and Agnus Dei and Gloria, which, all of these segments put together in the Mass was 20 to 30 minutes for composers. And that was the biggest production, really, that they had. But towards the middle and end of the period, they started exploring new avenues with music. So they started bringing in new instruments, and really, number one thing, they started playing around with the idea of humanism. There was different types of what they considered secular music of the time, which again didn't really come in until the end of the period. But they had the madrigal, which was a 16th century Italian kind of thing, very popular, and it was music set to one stanza of a secular poem, mostly about love, and more than any genre, this portrayed the humanism and the really the emotion. So that was one of the things, really, in Italy itself, this was where a lot of the music was starting. So they had operas and, the madrigal and all of this different kinds of stuff. And then they had the Shakespeare songs. So it was very like the very courtly love kind of idea. But it was very simple rhythms and a clearer melodic phrasing and plainer harmonies in the music as well. So we all know that during the Mass, when we're hearing Gloria, there is so many different parts and so many things going on in the background. It's very complex. So taking that religious complexity and breaking it down, we get more of like the secular stuff. So even today, our secular music is a lot less, I would say, complicated and really theory-based than the religious kind of music. But then finally you had the instrumental and dance music. So even today we still have that kind of thing, but in this time period, the vocal music was just so strong that instruments kind of fell into the background. So it was very important for the instruments to start building popularity. So in all classes, there was music. And in my opinion, the more wealthy people, they would have the bigger productions. So they would have, they would hire people to come and perform at their houses and, play for their big dances, balls, whatever that they were having. And it was more of a show than anything else. And when you went into like the towns, you had the more simple, like 3 people playing instruments and people dancing to it. So really, music was one of those things that spreads throughout all of the classes. It isn't really held back at all. And it's still like that today. But instrument-wise, the new ones that were introduced in this time period were the violin and the harpsichord. And, innovations for the lute construction made it the most popular instrument of the time. But for the dance music, the meter and like the beat and everything was so important, because when you had the big groups of people dancing and you had a big, band per se, it was very important for the band to stay together and keep on beat, which in our day and age now, we think of it as really, it's not that big of a deal. But back then, because music was not very, popular, it wasn't really big, not a lot of people understood it. It was harder for them to actually play together, and that's so interesting to me. So when they had the dances, they were so focused on what they were playing and everything, when nowadays it's just so, it comes so easily. So really, music in general has really improved since this time. But that was the big thing. It was, playing some instruments, but it was mostly vocal. Dance music, the Shakespeare songs, and the madrigal in Italy with the operas, but I mean, that was pretty much the secular music of the time. They really had nothing else. It was strictly religious. So obviously, periods following the Renaissance branched out a little more into the secular field, but as of right now, they're just discovering. So it was very interesting to learn about music of the time.